This episode of Untold Stories is sponsored by PowerSwap. You'll hear more about them later on in this episode. What is up, everyone? I am Charlie Shrem, and you are listening to a super special edition, watching a super special edition of Untold Stories, coming to you live from Los Angeles, Sunset Boulevard, Melrose Podcast Studio. We're right beneath the Chateau Marmont and Pink Tacos and everything, the Walk the Stars, everything, all the celebrities right down the road from us. So it's really exciting to be doing live shows like that again. I'm here today with Scott Stuart from the Kava Platform. Scott, thanks for coming on the live version of Untold Stories today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Charlie.
Oh, Scott, so DeFi is growing up. The Kava platform is growing up. There are so many different blockchains and products under Kava. And it seems to me that the whole ecosystem really under DeFi is changing. The whole industry, I would say, is starting to go through this maturing process. But it's a little bit concerning to me as I watch the NFT world, as I watch people with penguins and, Facebook profile pictures and things like that. It's a little bit reminiscent to the 2017 era, which
Yeah,
now we look
yeah,
back as something good. But at the same time, how is the DeFi world maturing and going to be able to attract the next, billion users?
yeah. So, I mean, certainly it's growing. Probably if you poll a lot of the folks that were around in 2017 and you ask them, kind of after that cycle, what would it look like, or will this thing look, what will DeFi look like in 2022, 2021? I think the reality is probably pretty far on the
Yeah.
optimistic side. And that's a good thing. So, I mean, like you mentioned with 2017, that's generally a good thing, right? Like you can see it manifest itself in ways that you're like, I don't really know. But overall, like growth is good, for the industry generally. Um,
Yeah.
Maybe I could just for the listeners, just take a quick step back and just like kind of introduce myself and Kava a bit.
I would love that.
Yeah. Well, so anyways, I'm Scott. So I started out kind of my career doing internet poker, which is actually what a lot of crypto folks did. So back when that was really taking off in kind of 2005, 6, 7, really got into that and became one of the top, specifically online poker players in the world at the time. And then, it was around 2011 or 2012 when the U.S. Justice Department actually made it difficult for U.S. players to play because they cut out the financial rails. They said
Black
you can't.
Friday, right?
Yeah, Black Friday.
Black Friday.
I specifically remember coming back and having a friend sit me down, like pour me a little glass of whiskey and be like, I gotta tell you something. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. Yeah, so they kind of took the legs out underneath the industry, at least in the US. And so like I went around, I went to Costa Rica and a few other places to try and play. But it ended up it was really nice, during college to be able to like wake up, not put pants on, manage your capital. And that was kind of the way to do it. And now, you had to go out of country. So that kind of stopped making sense. And I wanted to like build things anyways. I knew like at the time I wanted to build things anyways. And so after that, I just jumped into starting a business in the AdTech space. So now this is like in the early teens when Android and iOS were really starting to hit hard. A lot of people were putting money into advertising on mobile apps. And so I built out a company in that, and then now in crypto since like 2017, and the kind of the ride in there. And so I'd say, like, for me, one of the things that I've really kind of come to specialize in is like early state, like early things. So early business, early technologies, early businesses, separating out like kind of the noise from what I think makes sense. Like that's particularly stimulating. And then I founded this Kava Labs, and today we have a pretty great team of C-suite leadership that has like 20 or 30 years experience taking, emergent technologies to more mainstream audience, and then also like having success bringing companies public, etc.
Kava, it's been a pleasure working with you guys over the last year, having y'all sponsor Untold Stories and be with the Kava process throughout watching its ecosystem grow into multiple blockchains governed by different governance. Now we're talking about um, the Kava Swap, Kava Mint, and Kava Lend. And
Yeah.
we're going to get into governance in a few minutes because I want to understand more. But how do you design products? You talk about building products for the mainstream. The mainstream doesn't really know or isn't thinking about using their tokens to govern a blockchain being a part of that process. They don't really understand where they fit into the DeFi or NFT world. What would you say to those people who are looking at it for like 5 or 10 years down the road?
Yeah. So I mean, I think that, and this is actually this is why I'm actually like particularly excited about the current spot that the space is in today. Um, because I mean, I think you can say now crypto generally, and probably DeFi specifically, is pretty squarely in this like emergent technology category, right? Like you could have looked at it in like 2013 and 14. People could argue like, oh, that's not actually going to be a thing, right? Versus like it might be. Like, it's
You
pretty
still
clearly
can
gonna
make
be.
that argument. I'm still
So
scared of
some
that
people
every
could.
day.
So some people could. Um, but I think that a lot of people would say like it's not going to go away, right? Like it's going to stick around and it's going to grow. And then so now, companies and communities that are coming along and taking a stance at this, right? They can kind of take a look at this and say, well, all right, how can we basically the question to answer is how can we take it from where it is today to where we want it to be in the future, which is broader adoption or basically adoption to, well, I'll use terms like in a moment here, but sort of to the to yeah, basically broader late adopters. And so for us, like Kava, we basically come out and we say two things. We take a stance and we say that the way that we get there is through safety and reliability. So it's safety and reliability that's going to take DeFi to the broader majority, and that there's a community of individuals who are committed and know how to doing that, and that's important. Um, so like when I kind of look at this space, I kind of think of crypto as just another, we love it, but it's just another emerging technology. And fortunately, there's already like a playbook for how to get adoption for early technology. I like to use the kind of
Yeah.
Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm type thing. You get a picture of that chasm in the future. And so when you ask like, where's Kava taking the market? For us, we're setting the standard for reliability and safety. We're telling the market that Kava is the safest place to earn on your crypto, and that we're just applying this simple maturity model of stability, security, and streamlined UX that's going to take DeFi, like other emergent technologies, to the broader majority.
You talk about safety and a beautiful product that someone can download and in a fully decentralized way have access to decentralized finance, be able to do things like put a bunch of assets and then create your own mint your own stable coin that you can borrow against to be able to access and do all these things. I'm talking about the ability to take loans against your house in crypto, be able to tokenize your house eventually one day, where the mainstream world is accessing this on a day-to-day basis. But to get there, and this is kind of like a sticking point for me, you talk about safety and a beautiful product. Traditionally, you've had to give up decentralization for that. You've had to give up security for that because it's been like a lever. The nicer UX UI you want, you're like the simple fact of like, creating a yeah, it's a better product to create a password reset for your
Yeah.
user,
Yeah.
but if you remove the ability, that's full decentralization where they can't reset their password, you lose out on people who don't wanna be involved in something where you can lose all of your keys. So, like, where's the trade-off?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say something like password reset. So kind of the way that I think about that from the security perspective is I actually really like looking at the internet like in the late 90s and early 2000s, because that's an example of a set of technologies or an ecosystem of technologies that wasn't born out of regulation, right? There wasn't a regulation that said you have to salt and hash passwords, in a particular way. They just kind of existed. And I remember, going onto the internet like in the very early days and having like really rudimentary authentication. And so you
Yeah.
kind of had this competitive game of, some sites sucked and lost your data and you lost trust in them. And then some sites did a better job and you kept trust with them and you sort of built that on. And I think crypto is just kind of that on steroids, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it is,
Faster too.
and yeah, and today faster, right? So it's a similar sort of thing for what they had to do in the 90s. Now it's just directly tied to money. Um, yeah, and I mean to the point of the technology bit. I mean, when we look at like it's definitely collaborative, right? So we certainly think that we have competitors out there, right? Because we want to be competitive, we want to stay competitive in the market. But the technology is still evolving, and we kind of think of like a lot of the other sort of Ethereum competitors focus on that aspect of speed. Like you hear that a lot, and I think that speed is important, uh, and you need it. It is a fundamental thing to be able to process the amount of transactions, and that's like a pretty big thing in the space. But we're out there saying that, in order to really grow the industry and get it to cross the chasm into the majority, there needs to be that security component as well, as security in the sense of safety and reliability.
And so we need to figure out to what end, or where do we say we've lost that decentralization, but
Mm,
we're giving a better product. Like, where does
yeah.
that and actually, we've had people on the show who are trying now to actually quantify decentralization and where that comes in, and try to like attribute scoring to it, if you will.
So when we think about, and maybe it's worth like kind of getting
Yeah.
into how we think of security and how we can get some of those benefits. Um, how we can get some of those benefits of uh, being able to have a decentralized custodian for users' funds, that is able to provide like a good UX, as well as is able to
Yeah,
change what these
exactly.
things are secure. Yeah. And so for us, when we think of security, it is the technology. So it comes down to the technology, and we can certainly talk about like how Kava handles that. But I think importantly, it's more than the technology. So it's process. How are these applications being built? What's the
Ah,
quality assurance around that is
and
applied
deployed, right?
way to how it's deployed? And then because this is crypto, it's also financial. What protections are in place to give users safety around their funds in events that bad things do happen, right? And so we can kind of talk about tactics that the Kava community has created, like a Seifu fund, et cetera, that's there to be able to help give users.
It's amazing how community driven Kava has become, watching it over the last year. Not that it wasn't early on, but it's kind of how watching you guys as a team, Kava Labs, and the community be involved in shaping where the whole platform has gone. You talked about, I love poker. Let's talk about poker for a second, because
Yeah.
there's so many life lessons that you can attribute to poker, to how you probably run your lives, how you get up every day. I'm actually, if anyone's in LA, I'm hosting like a poker thing tonight with some friends.
Yeah.
If you want to come up, by the way, I know
I'm in
come
the.
down.
That's a good idea. I will do it for like a next one. I think it would be tough
Yeah,
getting out
next month
there.
we do it every month. It's like a
Yeah,
crypto versus Hollywood poker event, and crypto's winning right now. Steve
really.
Beauregard from GoCoin, yeah, he keeps beating everyone. He just comes in. Jeremy Gardner's also really good at poker, and everyone comes in and play. It's a lot of fun. We have a great time. Um, but I'm not very, very good at it. Can you teach me? Can you tell me?
Yeah.
Just
Is
give me
it
some
is it
like
Texas
pointers. Yeah,
Hold'em?
yeah. We play Texas Hold'em.
Okay. Well, the benefit of Texas Hold'em is only two cards, so you can print out all the combinations, on like a mouse pad. So it
That's
is a
where I
super.
get tricked up. I think I always have the best hand, but you have to figure out, it's also like life. You have to figure out what the hands of the possibilities. You have to be watching every single card all the time.
Yeah, and I think that just randomly on poker, like one of the like moments that I kind of realized that does then get applied to life, is this notion of range. So like if we're playing poker, and I always play the same hand the exact same way, it actually becomes pretty easy to play against me. So what I have to do is in certain situations, I have to create a range. I have to credibly represent to you that I could have a range of hands. I need to represent a range. And so sometimes that means that I may have a hand in actuality that I'm like, I wish I did not have this hand. But given how I'm basically playing the situation, I have to continue as if I have this hand and maybe a few other hands in the range. And I think at the high levels,
Oh, I
what
see what you
really
mean.
yeah. And at the high levels, what I would really look for when I'm playing Charlie is over a long enough period of time. And if it was online with some different tools, I'd be like, in certain situations, does he kind of skew the range, right? Out of normal. Is he pretty skewed on one side or the other? And then I'll try and, take advantage of that.
Are humans predictable in that sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Oh, and I mean, humans are emotional too. I mean, where most of the value ends up coming isn't when we sit down and we have our coffee and we're level-headed in the morning. It's like 2:30 a.m. and people
Yeah.
have been playing way longer than they're supposed to play, and that's where this kind of battle of attrition like really comes out. I mean, it was very fun. It was like stressful and like crazy weird hours, even more so than now. But it was it
How do
was
you
a,
do
it
it as
was
a
a
profession, though? How do you make money over a long term doing your taxes, creating, monthly cash flow? It's a business.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it mirrors the treasury management component of crypto, I think a lot, because what it does is you can have a great day. You crack open the charts like, oh, we're having a great day. You have tomorrow a terrible day. And so what it beats into you, is this idea of like expected value, right? Where you're like, I'm taking actions today that they may not result in like tangible outcomes. I may make great decisions today and actually it ends up sucking. But over time, if I sort of flip that coin enough, I'm creating value in the end.
We talk about creating value in the end. I think about that, how do I create value in the world that I'm in every single day? It's an interesting thought to ponder about, what type of value are we supposed to be creating in the world? Is it a tangible value? Uh is it doing, what we're doing in this whole crypto world? Is that the value that we're creating? We're going to be looked back decades from now and know that we were a part of something great, still are part of something amazing every single day. It's a beautiful thing to wake up to. And I guess that's why no one's playing poker over coffee in the morning.
One sort of like heuristic that I've seen for that I kind of like thinking about is this idea that you can kind of think of value creation, on this, sort of on this like 2D plane, where one side of it is like the amount of value. So one side of it's the amount of value, and then the other side of it is how many people are affected, right? And so I think that a lot of folks in the startup world, they really try and get all of the area under the curve. They try and say, I'm going to just affect the most amount of people that I can, with like just like the absolute like best product. And I actually think that a lot of like pretty good businesses are built out, from sort of taking either. So you can you can affect a lot of people in a small way. The way that you end up doing distribution with that's different, but that's like a camera filter or something, right? Like on an app, right? Where like I as a software developer could leverage this rails of Instagram or something, and I could add a marginal value that gets pushed out to a bunch of people. Or I could be in biotech and I could focus on a drug that like only impacts like a pretty small set of humans, but is the difference between them dying and living, right? And then there's sort of value under that curve. um
Actually, that's like a perfect you see that in medical technology a lot too, but continue your thought.
Yeah, and so for kind of this is the kind of like typical startup way that we tend to think of it is, yeah, I mean, it's very hard to do both. Like that, I mean, that's the golden thing. And so for us, if I have my hands tied behind my back and I have to start one way, I'll actually start with the latter. I'll try and find a smaller cohort of users and work with them to iterate on something that they say, actually, we really like this. And then it's just a matter of how far can you scale that out. And so, like, if we remember not too long ago, 2 or 3 years ago, DeFi, this idea, there were not that many DeFi users, right? If you talk to like Synthetics or MakerDAO or any of these projects that have a lot more like reputation today, they would probably admit like, yeah, we didn't have that many users, and we were still figuring it out. But what we did have when you talk to all of them is this sort of cohort of quite loyal users that really did like the product. And so this is that example for me of what I'm saying. Like, one of the things that I find interesting and that I like to specialize in is these newer technologies, because a lot of it is having to be critical in your thinking, kind of like with poker, and being able to assess what makes sense, what's actually a business model that people are using versus like, that's ridiculous. And
Yeah.
2017 was a great example of that, where for like every one thing that you're like, that's kind of interesting, you probably had like 30 or 40, that's ridiculous in my mind, to the point where like, am I going crazy? Like, am I, not getting this? But then it ends up being that a lot of those go away, and a few things remain, and you can capture certainly a lot of value, having discretion in an environment like that.
The biggest problem with DeFi today, as we know it, is there are simply no aggregators or way to bring all of this information and data together so we can trade off of it. We're going to Uniswap and we're clicking sell, 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 or buy, buy, buy. I mean, imagine staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning just so you can make a trade. The folks at PowerSwap, my newest sponsor, are doing exactly that. They are the fastest and most liquid aggregator on the Ethereum blockchain. They've built a state-of-the-art algorithm that aggregates all the major decentralized exchanges in order to beat the market price. They are willing to offer you on your first swap a 50% gas refund. Check it out in the show notes. I mean, there's no reason not to use PowerSwap. It's the same thing as using any of these other sites, but you're getting a better price, zero slippage, better swap, safer, faster, more secure. What's the downside? There is none that I could think of. And you're getting your first swap 50% gas fees paid for. It solves every problem that I could think of. Make sure you check them out. They're my sponsors. I love them. And I love them even more that they're pushing crypto forward.
It's definitely growing up and it's definitely changing. Are we transitioning now from the small users? And is that what it looks like now? We're transitioning from the small users of the maker dies and everything into the larger mainstream, where anyone I talk to, anyone who's in any industry, anyone who's anything, whatever, there's a reason for them to access or be involved or play with or buy or trade or speculate or lend out their assets or be involved in DeFi some way. Is that the transition that we're going
Yeah.
through now? Yeah, we
I
are.
mean, I think we're getting there. I think we're kind of, if we had that crossing the chasm thing, we're getting there. We're getting into that scary chasm part. There are certainly a cohort of venomous DeFi users who spend a lot of time and money and resource in the space. But crossing that little bit, I think is kind of exactly where we're at. One thing that I like, as basically like an operator in the DeFi space, is that we can actually look to the centralized technologies built around crypto as a harbinger for what DeFi can do. So, like, if we think to what was if you look at, let's say, something like the brokerages, so like exchanges, etc., and you look at what did those things look like in 2015, right? When you had local Bitcoins and Mount Gox and the kind of look and feel of that, versus fast forward today, where you have a publicly traded company in Coinbase that has these that has this feel of, when I put my money on Coinbase, it's safe. Didn't feel that way necessarily 5 years ago with exchanges, but when I put my money on Coinbase, it's safe, and they have a suite of products that are integrated together, and that to me is an example of a product or a segment of the industry that is starting to get over that hurdle. And
It
so the
just took
question is,
time.
like, what's
It
that?
took time. It just
Oh
took
yeah.
time, like constant taking shots and hacks and regulatory craziness and China basically banning Bitcoin every year. And it's just takes time.
Yeah. And I think that that's where we're at with DeFi. So I think that there are fundamental advantages to using blockchains and crypto technology, and we're working to take those advantages and make them more accessible. And so, for us, when we think about that future state, um, at least at Kava, when we think about that future state, it comes back to that notion of security is the only way that Kava can be the custodian of the funds that are sitting on the sideline, right? For that upcoming generation of wealth and for
Yeah.
institutional adoption broadly, that's the way that you're going to get there. And the idea is once you establish that base layer, you can create a composite layer of usability on top of it. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how we think about it. In the end, this Kava platform needs to be a decentralized fiduciary of that is responsible for custodying that next generation of assets coming in. And so I guess we could talk a little bit like about how we approach that today, like where we're at on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually was, as you're saying it, I'm saying to myself, what's the killer app? What do people want to use? So I'm going to kind of ask you too, uh, and kind of give you my thoughts on that. Is I see, and I it's something I didn't think would happen. Is I see stable coins
Yeah. Oh yeah.
as not
Love them.
something that I thought was going to be just this like government issued or corporation, like a Coinbase issuing, which they did. You with Circle USDC or whatever. With Center, they have their consortium of crypto companies and banks or whatever. Um, but what I see more happening is individuals minting their own stable coins or creating, a temporary stable coins that include baskets of different things, different assets, and then they can earn different yields, or they can, you guys actually under the Kava Mint, um that operates on the hard protocol. Users can put up a bunch of assets similar to MakerDAO and take out a USDX stablecoin, but they're actually minting their own stablecoin that includes all of their assets, and that's how many
Yeah.
stablecoins are out there in circulation. What are they then doing with those with USDX?
Yeah. So I mean, different people might have different answers. I mean, our answers, but people want to earn money. They want to generate returns. Like it's like, what's the point of financial services? It's to appreciate my wealth over time.
Tell it to
Um,
all the banks.
yeah, yeah. Well, and then so and then that so for us, that's what we're competing against. And so when I think of, I mean, that's what these brokerages are. So when you look at BlockFi or Celsius or any of these guys, right? I mean, the product that they're offering is that a user can take their wealth, put it into this service, and generate more wealth. And then in the case of these upcoming technologies, they're saying, well, you can do that better than you can with neobanks, and then neobanks are saying you can do that better than with the incumbent banks. And so what DeFi, I think, like unequivocally has been able to do is it's been able to offer very high yields based on some efficiencies that are found, but it does it in a really risky way. And so that's why you see all of this money pouring into DeFi, but you also see like comically large hacks happening
Yeah.
on almost a weekly basis at these days.
Polymarket, Thorchain. What's happening there?
So this is kind of where I'll get into like the approach that we take, and this is where I'm saying sort of security. It's security isn't just the technology, right? It is that process by which things are being developed. We certainly pour a ton of resources into that process, and then there's the financial aspect around it, and that's why I'm saying coming back to sort of the two things that we want to put out there in the industry is that having that premium on security in the sense of it being both safe and reliable, and having a community of individuals who are willing to do this and can do this is so important. Because that second part I think is often like understated, but that is kind of like the limiting factor in a lot of these cases. It's the people and the process behind which you create and deploy things that are safe. And so this is maybe this can be kind of yeah, I mean, like an example of this would be back in, so this is kind of like in the AdTech days of Scott. So with mobile apps, I mean, if you think of mobile apps as software, right? Mobile apps as software, I mean, it is a closed source technology that is not money, right? And still a lot of thought goes into the security behind that. When you think about, creating these blockchains or these financial stuff, and this is open source software that is money, but it's literally like the hardest thing to try and keep secure. And then of course you're competing with other people, so you're trying to like sort of do it as quickly as you can. And so like what we ended up doing, again, to borrow like from this idea of the AdTech space, is we've created a model that allows users to get an end-to-end experience with this infrastructure and gain the benefits of DeFi without the risk. And it's kind of, it's kind of like it's a model.
You
like
said the
Apple.
magic words.
Oh, what's that? Without the risk?
Being able to do DeFi without or with the lowest risks possible. Going back to the early part of the show, and I know exactly where you're going with this, but that's what traditionally has been lost. The more decentralized DeFi platforms you want to use, the more complicated, very unbrandable, very unsafe in the end, because the more decentralized, the more shit can happen and hacks can happen and things like that. So your Kava has kind of brought it to the perfect marriage point.
Or at least, we have our take, and this is why I love these industries, is we have our opinion, we have our take on what's going to get us to the broader adoption. And I think it'll work. But we'll see. And so the model that we take is this like Apple-like model where, if you look back then to phones, like in the late kind of whatever people call it, knots, early teens, right? One of the things that Apple did is they said, well, you have this phone and now you have these applications, and we have this ecosystem of applications that are curated. So the idea is that when a user shows up, they have this level of trust and security with the application. It's not going to do things that they don't expect it to do or that they don't want it to do. And it's going to have this look and feel that's consistent. So Kava, for sure, like its competitors, is a financial operating system. But we've created a community over the last few years that acts as basically a curation process for the protocols that get launched to the platform. And this is in contrast to, like, you could kind of think of Ethereum or these other way more open things as like an Android model where people can just kind of throw on whatever they want, and then it's at the user's risk. So for us, it's a way for us to
that's a good way to explain it.
Yeah. And so, but the trick there then, and I think, part of it is we kind of got there by luck, is you have to build out that community of individuals who are willing to participate in filtering what gets put onto the chain. I think that's another like really hard thing that, maybe not a lot of attention gets focused on. I mean, you can have something like Bitcoin, which is just great and actually is decentralized. And then you can have products that are effectively centralized, right? But call themselves blockchain. To actually hit that thing in the middle with the community is very tough. And I think some projects and communities do it better than others. And I think that one of the ways that we maybe backed into it with some luck is for all the things that people kind of maybe don't like about the Cosmos ecosystem, they had a pretty strong ethos around community. And so we did inherit some of that when we chose that technology, just sort of by virtue of like, oopsies, we inherited that ethos. And then also just kind of by luck when we, well, whatever, I'll call it luck now, when we were going to actually market the platform Kava, a couple of years ago, things weren't as easy and nice then. So we ended up having to sell a very large portion of the network to kind of keep the lights on and keep things going. So actually looking back on that now, I like that because, we don't control it. Like Kava has more value now. It's traded in lots of places, and we cannot, even if I want to, we can't grab up enough Kava. It's just kind of, kind of too expensive and too big now. And so, and then the hope is that if it keeps growing, that doesn't change. So we
This
have
is what
sort of,
people don't realize. No, so sorry, finish your thought.
well, it's just, so we've just kind of, we've happened to have found our place without in that, like there was planning that went into that, but I would say, and that again is the reason why I like this stuff in startups, is that like you can't plan for everything. And in this case, we ended up just getting this like kind of right combination where we have the ability to, we have this great list of validators and holders who are leaders in trust in the industry, that are able to look at this stuff and verify that. And then of course, certainly we promote that too.
It's just I'm smiling because I'm thinking back on just like imagine some kid, he's in college right now and he's coming to work for Kava, and comes and and you hire he or she, and he um starts working, and you're like, all right, work on this, work on that. But wait, before we can deploy anything, we have to make sure the community is okay with it, because the community actually are the token holders that govern the whole platform here and the multiple different products that are within it. So it's like, could you imagine someone who doesn't really understand crypto, who's just a computer science major, come and intern for you? It's like, say
We have
what?
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's just this is so trailblazing. They not only do they don't teach this stuff in textbooks, it's just it's happening in real time.
Yeah. Well, and I would say like for me and what I do, particularly at this company, I mean, if I were to divide my day up these days, let's say in the last 6 months, I'd say easily like 40% of it is devoted to that process. We are bringing in lots of not crypto people into this industry. These are very talented people who are coming in, and it takes time for them to learn, and it takes time for them to adopt our process. But I think that's that's an advantage that we're going to have that carries forward into the future. Is putting focus on that.
So you have, I want to talk now about the different products that are on the platform, and Kava Swap, which is launching actually like in a few days from now. But
Yeah.
talk about Kava Mint that operates on the hard protocol, Kava Lend, and then Kava Swap.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also, yeah, we'll talk about that. But just that reminds me, though. I mean, again, when you design things, there's trade-off, right? So for us, we don't have, you go, if you, and kudos to Cardano or whatever, but when you look at some of these ecosystems, it's just this cascade of like projects. And you might be like, a lot of those are random little projects, but there's a ton, right? One of so the benefit of what we do is that there is actually, I think, the highest level of safety in the sense of reliability and usability in what we do. But we are not able to put out project as quickly and in as much volume as a lot of the other as a lot of of the competitors. So today we have three, and I'm pretty actually, and there'll be a few more rolling out like in the next year. But the way that I can kind of like, the way that I would describe this is, yeah, you basically have that foundation, and then on top of it, you have this usability layer where there's composability. And so Kava Swap is actually, I'm very excited about Kava Swap because that's kind of like the final piece that you need for really solid composability. So we have Kava Mint. Kava Mint is a borrowing facility. So it allows users to put crypto assets into the protocol and draw a stable coin called USDX from it. And then we also have Kava Lend. Kava Lend is a money market, which allows users to supply a number of different assets and borrow against those assets. I'm just like imagining in the YouTube podcast images coming up.
Yeah.
And then now we'll have Kava Swap, which allows users to swap the tokens that are available on the Kava platform, as well as supply liquidity to the protocol to earn rewards. And so what's really nice about those three kind of key ingredients is now we can do things that streamline, and then we'll have a robo advisory coming out in Q4,
Sure.
which allows users to automate those strategies, right? So the kind of basic.
I'm excited about that stuff. I like that too.
Yeah, and so again, for us, that ethos is around the user and usability, right? I mean, we're really thinking, and this is something that we saw in 2017, 18, and even still today. A lot of projects, they talk about themselves, right? They're like, we're the best because we're the fastest, or we're the scalablest, or we're the whatever, right? And I think again, the path to victory, the path to getting us to where we want to be, it starts and ends with the user, right? It's focusing on what the user wants. When I say that safety and reliability is important, I'm not saying it because I think that is, right? I'm saying that's what we think the user is ultimately going to gravitate to over time. So when we make a decision to release a robo advisory, it's for a specific need for a user to be able to automate a strategy, to be able to earn, knock down the barriers to be able to earn in an easier way. And then, there's other things around that. So if we if we talk about Kava Swap, so one of the things that we've done already around safety is the Kava community has created a proposal, and it's passed, to create a SAFU fund. So this is like a general purpose insurance fund, and right now it has like a bit under $100 million in it, all denominated in
Wow.
Kava tokens. But yeah, so what you see, so the difference is, like, you see a lot of like projects, they'll kind of go along, something bad will happen, and then they're like, okay, what do we do? Well, what should we do? Should we, like, how should we solve this problem? Is thinking about that ahead of time. And that came out of like investigation. So at least today, we went around and worked with a lot of the different insurers. And it ended up being that it's like, oh, okay, I could get a policy for like a few $100,000, but it's not going to do anything, right? When your platform has hundreds of millions of dollars on it, like
Yeah, it's
a
not
few
enough.
$100,000 policy is not going to cut it, right? So it ended up being the Kava community themselves that are underwriting the products, right? They're saying, we're going to put, Kava to work to underwrite the safety of the products for
It's like a
users.
captive insurance type thing.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And so now you can see how, as protocols start to be added to the platform, you get this increase in usability. So an example is when, after Kava Swap launches, I don't know, maybe in like late September, there'll be a proposal that will allow the platform to programmatically liquidate a portion of the Kava tokens that are sitting in the Kava Seifu fund through Kava Swap into stable coins. And so the idea is we're diversifying the basket of assets for that Seifu fund, so that in the event, in times basically when these systems hit the most amount of stress or risk, when prices are going down,
Yeah.
you have a basket of collateral that is stable.
And that continues to further keep decentralization, if further keep governance. Everyone's involved in the process. It's like a fully created cycle. It's the token holders are the ones voting on this, because at the end of the day, it'll either increase, the value of themselves, of their tokens, but of the whole ecosystem, the whole platform, or it won't. And everyone's involved in the process. And it also like hedges risk at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
It's
it
a beautiful,
definitely,
such a
like, I
beautiful
think,
thing.
and those are, I mean, that's the type of stuff that I actually get kind of pretty excited about, because,
Yeah,
we'll
me too.
have we have our helmet on and we're working every day, right? And you wake up like, oh, I'm tired and I'm working. I'm tired and I'm working and I'm doing this stuff. But, sometimes, like on a Saturday when you're on a walk and you lift your head up, you're like, we've sort of created a system that has decided to put $100 million, to work in ensuring the safety for this like automated money protocol. Like, that's nice, right? Like it's
Yeah,
nice, and then it's nice to
it's
see
pretty
it.
freaking cool.
Yeah, and it's nice to see it work, right? Like one of the, you don't get to do it a lot, but basically, like, having that little bit of foresight, or having that little bit of planning for it, and having it happen, and then be covered in that situation, you're like, that's, it's a good feeling to be able to like actually
Tens
have that one.
of millions of people, in fact, hundreds of millions of people work so paycheck to paycheck. They probably will have, if you make, for every $100 you make, you maybe have $1 left for savings traditionally. And that's the way I grew up. That's the way my parents did it. That's the way everyone at you college, you have to spend what you need to live, and then you save. What you did, you talk about you taking that walk on a Saturday morning. What you have done is you've given billions of people the ability to take that fiat or whatever they were earning in and put it into a new financial system to earn yield for their families and for their future. Sovereign wealth, financial freedom. That's what you did. That's what we're doing here. And that's why this is so important. It's such a societal shift that is changing people's lives people tell me every single day the things that I just told you. That's what someone told me that yesterday. I'm not making this up. That's why you should realize that it's an amazing, amazing world. And a lot of people have imposter syndrome in this space too, because they're worried, like, what are we doing? Am I doing it? My parents look at us like we're crazy. You know, don't ever feel sad. Don't ever feel like you're not doing something that's worth doing. The world is going to look back on us decades from now, and just was going to be bigger than the internet, bigger than the printing press. Hell, this will have been bigger than sliced bread. That last part was a joke.
Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, I mean, like for us, and maybe I can talk about like a little bit of that process that we have, at least at Kava Labs, as we're trying to like onboard new people, and like plug Kava Labs. You want to work for a company that's doing these things, you can apply kava.io/careers. It's out there. So one of the things that we do to try and create a process around like motivating folks who come on, and a lot of these guys are coming on. Some of them have some experience, but a lot of people are really quite green to the industry. Is painting that mission internally that gets people aligned. So like when you're working back when you're working in a startup where there's like less than 10 people, it's actually really easy to get everybody aligned, right? Because you're all in a room, and if you don't actually ship this code and make some money, the company's going to die. So it's pretty easy, right? It's like we're aligned because we don't ship the code, make some money, we're going to die. It becomes actually a bit more challenging in terms of process as you grow out the amount of people and and if you have some success, because okay, maybe we don't ship this code and we don't die, right? So then why should we ship this code? And so one of the things that we've had to find around culture is how do we set a mission that's both like concrete and tangible as well as aspiring. And so like I like taking examples of like something like what SpaceX has done, where Elon Musk could come on and you could be like, well, our company culture is take actions that make me the most money, right? Like build rockets and stuff, but like in the end, I'm going to get a bunch of money, so isn't that great, right? And like functionally, that's what's happening with that company, but that's not what they're saying, right? That's certainly not motivating to people. That's not going to motivate our employees. That's not going to motivate the community. That's not going to motivate users. And so they led with this idea of Occupy Mars, right? It's giving you this idea that far away, we're going to go do something, and that's kind of this nice idea of like we can go and we can occupy Mars, whatever.
Yeah.
And then they've taken it a step further to say we're going to create a civilization that has 1 million people on it in Mars. We're going to create a city with 1 million people on Mars. And so this is an example of creating that mission, at least for their company, that allows every employee to sit down as they're coding or whatever and visualize what that thing is that they're creating. And each person can have their own representation of what that is. It's this concrete thing, and it implies success for the business. So one of the things that we're playing with right now is, getting our employees to have this notion that we want to have 100 million users that are crypto native, right? When I talk about like this next generation of wealth, like, every generation sort of reinvents what they're doing. And particularly with technology, you have the opportunity to change that actually quite a bit. And so when we're building Kava and we're planning for things, we're not really planning for like, like next month's investor, right? It's like, if you look now 5 years, 10 years out from this, and you're having these young people who are now like 3, 8, 10 years old, and the decisions that they make, we want to enable them to have a platform where they can just be crypto native. They can just have their money sitting on there. They know that they have a safe custodian of their funds, and they have the ability in one place to be able to do any of the transactions that they need to be able to do. And so that's kind of like a metric internally that we're going going towards.
I want to work. If anyone's listening and watching and wants to work for Kava, please, it'll be in the show notes. You can follow them on Twitter. You can, he actually just said the link. What's the link again? Careers?
I hope when you type it in the thing, it's kava.io/careers.
Amazing. Scott Stewart, you are the Chief Product Officer and co-founder of the Kava Labs, the team behind so much I didn't realize of the Kava platform. Thank you so much for coming live on us. That's all the time we have today on Untold Stories special episode. Thank you guys for sponsoring. You guys are amazing. Without you, so many of us wouldn't still be here today. And I'm excited to continue following and seeing what's up next in 3 months from now.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Charlie.